players, John the Wise here, and I got another video for you. Today we're going to be talking about how you can extract some RPG ideas out of Helldivers 2. If you're anything like me, you've been playing the hell out of Helldivers 2 recently. It's a fun action third-person shooter with your buddies. You kill bugs, you kill robots. And I always thought that there's always great things that you can get out of media such as video games and movies. And I wanted to give you guys my insight on how you can draw some ideas from the video game and also some traps from drawing ideas from video games that you can use in your own RPG sessions. But before we get into all that, make sure you guys follow me on social media at John the Wise. Anywhere there's social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, that's where you can find me. The best way to support this channel is a like, a subscribe, a share, and also going to patreon.com/John the Wise, where you can support me. And I really appreciate all the love and support I get from my patrons. So before we start, I have one opinion that I wanted to get across that I hope all of you can understand. In my opinion, video games and tabletop RPGs are completely different. There are some concepts that overlap, but there's a lot of things that are great in video games that just do not make sense in RPGs. I've seen people try to implement them. I've tried to implement them myself, and it was at great detriment to the whole game. And I'll cover some of those topics. But when you're thinking of a game like Helldivers 2, it is definitely a video game. It's a video game in every sense. But there are concepts within the video game that can easily be used in your tabletop RPG. They're esoteric, they're philosophical, and they're the kind of ideas that will carry over into your tabletop RPG games. So for those of you that have never played Helldivers 2, it is a third-person shooter game with squad-based mechanics. You call down orbital strikes, and you and your buddies jump onto planets, destroying bugs or robots in the name of Super Earth. And Super Earth is the in-game lore for the planet that we all live on, the planet that we're all from, the main planet that we're all from. And if you guys have played games like Warhammer or have watched the movie Starship Troopers or StarCraft, you all understand what the idea is. There's humanity, there's Earth, and we have to protect it. And Starship Troopers is definitely the #1 inspiration for a game like this. It's got down that whole propaganda cult kind of going on. And speaking of propaganda cult, that is the first point that I want to make about this game. The idea of Super Earth and living in this society is a really cool concept that you can dissect. You and your players are role-playing basically within this video game as soldiers that are part of a cause, and even when you talk to the people within your ship, they all basically parrot the same kind of propaganda that you hear within the game, which is a good bug is a dead bug, and everything you do is for Super Earth. So you can definitely take that into your tabletop RPG. It's a great way to create a cult in your tabletop RPG, and it's a great way to understand how the NPCs and people within that cult will behave. If they're all in on this cult or corporation, if you're playing Cyberpunk, then you know that they're going to be making irrational choices. It's really cool to put your players within a cult like that where they can infiltrate it, they can find out what's going on within that organization, and they can really witness the blind faith and the crazy things people will do for the faith that they have in an organization like a cult or a religion or Super Earth in the case of Helldivers 2. Now, one of the really fun aspects of Helldivers 2 is you drop on a planet and you basically have to adapt to your environment. And that is another concept that you can take into your tabletop RPGs. Dropping your players in an unknown location and expecting them to navigate through it is a fun way for them to explore the lore of the place that they're in, the people, and the environment within it. They can find out what's dangerous, what's safe, what can help them, what can hurt them, and these are all concepts that you can throw in if you are willing to throw your players into a place where they have never heard of before. Essentially, when you do that, you're forcing your players to be resourceful and to figure out how they can adapt to the environment that they're in, because it's unfamiliar and all they have is the clothes on their back, the weapons on them, and the guy and girl right next to them that can help them in the situation they're in. One great example, in one of my games, I had a D&D 5e campaign where the way that I introduced all the players, They were all in a tavern, and you know, that's kind of like a basic trope. You all meet in a tavern kind of thing. But the way that I had it done was they were all in a tavern, but they weren't there together. They were there separately for whatever reason. And then all of a sudden, they kind of blacked out and went into this other dimension where the entire world is frozen, except for the 4 or 5 players that are within the party. And they look around and they notice that the entire world is frozen except them. So it automatically tells them, like, okay, we don't know where we are. We don't know how we got to this place. We don't even know each other, but we know that we're all connected some way because we're the only ones that can move and interact. And it basically tells the players, I didn't force them to work together, but they obviously went through a situation where they're like, okay, there's a reason why this happened to us. And even though we don't know each other, maybe we should work together, at least in the near future, to figure out what the hell just happened. Now, my next point is something that might sound a little bit weird on the surface value, but Helldivers 2 is not about killing as many bugs as possible. I know that sounds crazy because every single video that you see and every concept within the game is of the players just killing hordes and hordes of bugs. But that's the thing, the bugs never end. There is no end to them. You can only try to keep them at bay while you get as many objectives done as possible. And that's what the real concept of the game is. You drop on a planet, there's a bunch of objectives, there's your main objectives and there's optional objectives, and you want to try to get as many of them done as much as you can without losing all of your ability to respawn or reinforce on the planet. So in your tabletop RPG, the enemies are endless, and that's exactly what concept I would bring into my tabletop RPGs. Now, if you want to be a murder hobo going around killing everything that moves, that's fine and dandy, but sooner or later it's going to catch up to you, okay? These organizations, they work in large groups. If they're the police, if they're a cabal of sorcerers, they have their minions, and once they find out you're a threat and they all decide to work together, well, you know what can happen. The exact same thing that happens when the players decide to band together against the single threat. The single threat is at a great disadvantage. So I would take that concept with me into my tabletop RPGs and try to drive home to the players that the enemies are endless, and it's not about killing as many enemies as possible, because that will just make you a target. It's all about making sure you get your objectives done as much as possible to move your agenda and getting out of there safely. Now, one of the really cool things about Helldivers 2 is there is a variety of bugs. You got invisible bugs that leap at you from behind. They literally go behind you, they're invisible, and then they attack you from behind, kill you in 2 hits, and they're pretty resilient as well. And then you got these big hulking bugs that charge at you from long distances and have heavy armor in the front and light armor in the back. And then you got these other bugs that spit out goo from long range. They have ranged attacks. And this combination of all of these bugs working together and the variety of enemies forces the players to bring a variety of weaponry to counteract that danger. Some enemies are killed in 1 hit with the smallest gun, but killed in many hits with that same gun. So it's a good idea to bring a recoilless rifle or an antimatter rifle to take care of the big things. And also you want to make sure you have a small fast shooting gun to get rid of the little things, because the little things can swarm on you if you don't take care of them. And I would take that concept with me into my tabletop RPG games. Make sure that the enemies that are facing your players have a variety to them. The way they behave, the way they think, and the way that they employ their tactics. You might have a wizard that stands in the back and surveys the battlefield and comes up with the great spells and the great ideas to be able to win the battle, while you have the barbarians and the crazy lunatics in the front that just run in and want to die, and they're keeping people busy. A really good book that I would recommend is The Monsters Know What They're Doing, or some similar title to that. I'm putting it on the screen, obviously, so you guys can check it out. But basically, this book extrapolates on that whole idea that the monsters know what they're doing. They work together, they have tactics. If it's an ambush monster, then when you walk into a room, you're not going to see it. It's going to be hiding behind something. It's invisible. It's using the shadows. It's not going to just be standing in the center of the room waiting for you to come and attack it so it can attack you back. So these are the kind of ideas that I would implement in my tabletop RPGs. Make sure that the more variety you have, you understand that you're adding more difficulty to the game. And you know, some games, especially some video games, they think that raising the difficulty is you give your monsters more hit points and they do more damage, and that's what makes them more difficult. And that's a boring, lazy way, in my opinion, to make enemies more difficult. Instead, to make them more difficult, you mix them with other enemies, and all the enemies use different tactics that when combined become very dangerous, because you have to think of so many things at once. I don't know how many times I was playing Helldivers 2 and I cleared out a bunch of bugs in front of me and I'm like, okay, we're all good. And then this invisible leaping asshole comes from behind and just kills me in 2 hits. Or even if I see the invisible asshole, it takes a lot of shots to bring him down. And that adds a whole new element. It's one bug. I've killed thousands of bugs, but that one bug is what did me in because of the tactics that it used. Now, before we end this video, I want to tell you guys about an RPG trap that you might get inspired to use in your games. That's right. Remember in the beginning of the video, I told you that video games and tabletop RPGs are different, and this is what I mean. Do not take the concept of collecting a bunch of objectives in one place and putting them together as a main objective to be a fun idea. In Helldivers 2, it's really great when you land on a planet and there's all these different objectives you can do, and there's all these different things that you can do to accomplish them. And when you're done, there's a whole tally of all the cool objectives you've done, and it gives you more rewards for it. Well, remember, a video game should reward you. There should be loot, there should be credits, there should be all the things that you use to upgrade your character. But tabletop RPGs are a little bit more esoteric than that. Yeah, sure, you'll get some upgrades, you'll get some items, you'll get some loot, but it's the journey to the loot that makes tabletop RPGs more ambitious than video games. Also in tabletop RPGs, you might finesse a guard, get inside, learn some information, talk to a bartender, listen in on a conversation, and that will lead you to the room that has the chest that you have to put a number pad lock into that you picked up from another conversation to get the item that you need. And you're jumping through all these hoops and all these things that you came up to with yourself using your social and your tactical prowess to figure out how to get them. In video games, you just get it because you killed a bunch of people, you have more XP, you're higher level, you unlock it. Unlocking things is not something that really happens in tabletop RPGs, and if you really introduce it to your game, then you are making a worse video game. That's what I always say. You can play tabletop RPGs, and if you make them too much like video games, you're just making a worse video game. There are better video games out there where there's instant gratification. They're designed for it. You kill the enemy, the loot falls off the enemy, you put in your inventory, you go to town, you sell it, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole system in place for that. Tabletop RPGs, it doesn't really make sense to do that. And it makes it a worse video game. Video games do it much better. Let's say you kill something, it drops some loot, you pick it up. The game master might tell you, okay, well, the item is unremarkable. Or, you know, during the combat, you destroyed the item because of the combat, you know, the combat is chaotic, you killed it. Or you take it to a place and the guy says, oh, I already have 10 of these, I don't even want them. And that's not something that happens in a video game. In a video game, vendors have infinite money and they buy everything that you sell them, even the stuff that you just bought from them moments ago. And those are concepts that would really take you out of the game if you did it in tabletop RPGs. And even though it seems like you gave them a bunch of options, you basically put them on a railroad with multiple rail tracks. It doesn't matter what their concepts and ideas are. You already told them, like, hey, these are the things that you can do, just pick one. Instead of telling them, hey, you're dropped in this world and try to figure it out on your own. Yeah, there might be a bank there. You want to rob the bank? That's up to you. I mean, I don't know. I think it's a stupid idea. Yeah, there's a gang hideout over there, but, you know, it's always been there. And they have nothing to do with you, and they never even bothered you once in this whole campaign. And the Thieves Guild, why would you want to mess with them? They're a powerful organization, and if you make enemies with them, it's not going to be good for you. So the players really have to be motivated to go and deal with these things because there are lasting repercussions. It's not just about unlocking loot or unlocking the next big thing for their character. It's about moving the campaign forward, addressing plot lines, addressing your character's history, and making sure that everybody has a good time role playing. Well, there you go, Destroyers. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about today. Helldivers 2 is a really fun game, and it's a really fun video game, and it's given me some inspiration for my tabletop RPGs, and I hope you guys can use them in yours. All right? Thank you so much for the support. We'll see you guys on the next one. I appreciate it. Bye.